both obtaining rank ordering from participatory discussions about the different ingredients, and then trying to actually obtain weights from participatory consultations. And the second thing was to implement a survey where they identified, it was an iterative process, they first identified the list of things that should be in the survey, and then asked people, do you have this, do you not? Is it because you don't want it, because you don't value it? Do you think it's essential for everybody in South Africa or partial for it? So on the basis of those survey questions and the regional consultations, they then set weights, but then the problem is updating them. You know, they've now been in existence 12 years or whatever. So, but it would seem at this stage quite useful to do several different techniques, some more, if the political context is stable, some more sort of participatory and generating discussion, and some more based on the literature, and then the empirical statistical tests, which always have to be done whether or not they're reported, looking at the correlation, looking at factor analysis, looking at, just really if the measurement and the structure that you have is measuring what you think it is. So I don't think that that's terribly useful, but those are some of the ingredients that could come in a first survey, in addition to obviously a poverty committee and the discussions among experts. In terms of Pete also adding, well, what is the value of having multi-topic writ large versus in-depth? And I think really this is a question which, because clearly one needs both. So one option is to have some subsamples of existing data that would either go into depth in certain or would treat missing variables to fill the gaps, or to try to find the shortest tolerable question for missing dimensions that could come in. But I think that this is really the right question to ask, but we're also not sure of what the value will be, and I think it will really be if there is a demonstrated value to looking at simultaneous coupled deprivations for policy, for targeting, for measurement, then it will have to move in the direction of either putting more data into surveys, or, as Tony Atkinson keeps stressing, trying to link surveys better through identification numbers or through other things, linking them to administrative data as well. The other point on that, Jaime, was yours about if you have violence and it's not relevant, then how can equal weighting be tolerable amongst countries? One of the things in the weighting discussion we realized is that there are different motivations, two very grossly different motivations for setting weights. One is policy priority within a context at a particular time, and the other is enduring value. And enduring value, even if you have zero violence, that might be of use to you, that might be valuable to you, and that might be important information, because if it changes and you now have positive deprivations and violence, that might be important. And so I think in the MPI weights or in the normative weights, so far we've been not talking about them for policy planning, but in terms of enduring value, in which case, even if they're, in low violence countries, that might be an important point of information. Similarly, in countries that have low MPI, as it is defined now with these acute deprivations, even if they say it's too low and we need a better measure for our country, it's still quite encouraging to figure out that they have very low deprivations in this context. And finally, a couple of you said, and I would like to underscore, and I think Jenny, maybe you might want to also come in, but that in terms of using MPI for policy, just like the HDI, that's not what it is designed for, and it's simply too crude an instrument. And so although countries might want to look at equivalent scales, that's certainly been what we've been trying not to encourage with such a crude instrument. And clearly at the national level, then, as James said, all these issues need to be raised and looked at much more deeply. And finally, in income, we will, whether or not to include income, whether to include income as Mexico does with 50% weight, or whether to keep it totally separate. I think that that's a open question. And there are, if one includes it, there are the issues that you raised of double counting and relations to the other dimensions. So it's a non-answer. But Jenny, do you want to come in on, and also on his question about releasing MPI now?
I wouldn't kind of go possibly as far as Sabina to, I don't want to say it doesn't have any policy value. I mean, clearly we want to be policy relevant. It's just a question of what you can pick it up and do with it as it is published as a single number, in the book or whatever. And so what we're hoping is it will provide important insights, it will stimulate debate and then further work and further analysis. And I think India is actually a very nice case where, frankly, we were quite surprised by the reception and the interest and clearly the receptivity to the results, even if there's some controversy and so on around them. I've got colleagues in New York today who are having meetings with a delegation from Morocco, which is up in arms. Because in a bunch of countries, as you know, we get an MPI which is far higher than the $1 a day head count. And so you can imagine there that the governments are not particularly impressed either.
That's the tragedy of indices, you know.
But what we're explicitly doing this year, I think, I mean, there's always a kind of judgment call as to when something is in reasonable enough shape to be able to push it out at the global level and have something, a high-profile publication like the Human Development Report releasing the results. Our judgment was that it's an apt time to do that. I think that the reception that we've gotten so far confirms that, I think both at the political as well as in terms of the technical debates and so on. But we're explicitly releasing it as an experimental series alongside two other new indices, which I'll just mention now, an inequality-adjusted Human Development Index and a new Gender Inequality Index. So the nice thing about the inequality-adjusted HDR, which we've been working on as well with James and Sabina, is that that's also very relevant for the developed countries. So as you know, the MPI, anything above, I guess, Peru kind of falls out in terms of being able to tell you anything very interesting. But with the inequality-adjusted one, we get some very nice results, as well as with the Gender Inequality Index. And for those, actually, we're doing close to 140 countries. So we've gotten quite nice results there. But for each of these new indices, or each of these new series, we're explicitly introducing these on an experimental basis. And Bonafide looking for feedback, suggestions. Clearly, you know, it's unlikely to be overhauled very radically, but we can certainly change and adjust the index over time. That's happened with the HDI over time. It's been subject to several innovations in different reports over time in response to criticisms and debate and so on. So we're very much looking forward to feedback and to improvement. But as I think we've discussed, I think a lot more can be done at the national level than can be done at the global level, because at the global level we're still going to have these, in particular the data constraints. Thanks.
So I think we're dreadfully late, I think. But it's a good thing, it's good to have all these questions. So come back with your coffee, I mean, if you can. We want to, within 5 minutes. I don't know if it's possible to go and get coffee in 5 minutes, but try and come back with your coffee and let's continue. Thank you.